Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has met with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Arreaza has ratified the commitment made by the Bolivarian Revolution with the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. He also said multilateralism is needed to guarantee peace and that Venezuela continues to suffer interference attempts.
There is an extremist supremacist government headed by Donald Trump that has launched a series of attacks against the Venezuelan people. Venezuela is under an economic blockade similar to the one Cuba has been suffering for 60 years. The world banking system is afraid to work with Venezuela because of these sanctions. We have taken the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals as the core in our policies for the next 6 years. We have been doing it since 2015. President Nicolás Maduro is committed to develop our national policies in the same line promoted by the United Nations for a better country, a better region, and a better society.
Meanwhile, one of Venezuela's opposition leaders, Claudio Fermín, has said that only citizens can act on the country's internal matters. He referenced a recent interventionist statement made by the Lima Group, which sought to undermine the country's electoral process.
I highly value what happened here in Venezuela on May the 20th, 2018. Those millions of citizens who took to the polls are very important. The fact is, this government is being criticized for many reasons, and although I agree with many of them, there are many more which I do not agree. So independently from all criticism, what validates any country's sovereignty are their citizens, not foreign ministers or presidents. Let's not consider Maduro for a moment. Let's think of the future. This is a small club of heads of state who have decided to undermine a government for not agreeing with them.
Some world leaders have spoken against the United States' attitude towards Venezuela. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that U.S. influence killed any chance for dialogue between the Venezuelan government and the opposition. Lavrov added the approach of the United States towards Venezuela highlights the country's attempts to undermine governments around the world.
We have heard talk that pushes for military intervention in Venezuela, that the United States will now recognize as the president of Venezuela the new head of the country's National Assembly, not Nicolás Maduro. All this is very alarming and shows the U.S. approach of undermining governments they don't like. That is a priority for them, in Latin America and in other regions.
British Prime Minister Theresa May has won the no-confidence motion by a short margin. With 325 votes in favor and 306 against, May will remain as Prime Minister. The no-confidence motion was presented on Tuesday by Labourist leader Jeremy Corbyn after a majority of lawmakers rejected May's Brexit deal. This has been called the biggest political defeat of any government since the 1920s.
I'm pleased that this House has expressed its confidence in the government tonight. I do not take this responsibility lightly, and my government will continue its work to increase our prosperity, guarantee our security, and to strengthen our union. And yes, we will also continue to work to deliver on the solemn promise we made to the people of this country to deliver on the result of the referendum and leave the European Union.
Our correspondent in the United Kingdom, Pablo Navarrete, gives us more details.
A short while ago, it was announced that British Prime Minister Theresa May had won a no-confidence vote put forward by the Labour Party and their leader Jeremy Corbyn yesterday, following the crushing defeat suffered by British Prime Minister Theresa May in her Brexit vote in Parliament, where she lost by 230 votes, the biggest loss in recent history by a government. Now, today she survived by a mere 19 votes, with 325 voting in favour or against the motion and 306 in favour. Now, this means that Theresa May has survived in her government for the moment, although there is nothing stopping the Labour Party or the Labour Party from putting forward the motion of no confidence again. Must remember that Margaret Thatcher did it, I think, 7 times in 1979 before coming to power. Now, the British Prime Minister, before the vote, there had been a discussion about the motion in Parliament, in which Jeremy Corbyn called Theresa May's government a zombie government. And it is certainly true that for the past month, or at least for a while now, that Theresa May's authority has been challenged on numerous occasions, both within her party. She survived a motion of no confidence from within her party, and the government has suffered numerous defeats, with many analysts saying that they are in government but not in power. So Theresa May has offered to speak to the opposition parties for what she claims is to look for a solution, although Jeremy Corbyn has said that unless her government rules out a no-Brexit scenario, it will not enter into these talks. Now, Theresa May has said she will come back to Parliament on Monday for another vote on the deal. There's nothing to say that there will be a significant difference, so she will be defeated once again. And the paralysis and that Brexit has caused in her government, her ability to govern, seems likely to continue. It's very difficult to predict what will happen. She has survived by a slim margin tonight, but she is severely weakened, and her government is also very much not really in control. So this is how things stand at the moment.
Thank you, Pablo, for that report. Police in Brazil have fired rubber bullets and tear gas at protesters demonstrating against a hike in the price of public transport. The police also blocked others from reaching the demonstration taking place on the main avenues of Sao Paulo.
We were only making our war cry. Nobody was doing anything against the police, but they started throwing bombs at us. Without any reason, they threw tear gas. We were just sitting on the ground and chatting.
Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemos, tells us more.
We are currently at the famous Paulista Avenue, where students are protesting against the increase of prices in public transportation, from 4 reals to 4 reals and 30 cents. Police tried to stop the demonstration shortly after it started. There's a lot of tension at this moment. Police have stopped students from entering the Consolacion Avenue. Police also fired tear gas and rubber bullets at the protesters, but the students continue with their demonstration. It's important to remember that President Jair reduced the minimum wage for 2019, but at the same time, prices for public transport are increasing. That is why students are protesting. We'll keep you updated on the clashes between protesters and police.
The Argentinian President Mauricio Macri has met his Brazilian counterpart Jair Bolsonaro in Brasilia. Bolsonaro greeted Macri at the Planalto Presidential Palace. The two leaders discussed the future of the Mercosur regional bloc, as well as border security and other defense issues. They also refused to recognize the elected government of Venezuela. Macri is the first foreign leader to visit the new Brazilian president. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. A company owned by Peruvian President Martín Vizcarra has been linked to the Odebrecht case and will now be investigated. The Congress has approved an investigation on the consortium that built the South Interoceanic Highway with Odebrecht. Between 2006 and 2008, the consortium hired a company owned by Vizcarra. The president has denied the accusation. Thousands of workers in Peru have taken to the streets to reject a government's reform that is hurting labor rights. More in this report.
Workers do not want to be exploited anymore. Over 200 trade unions joined together to demand the government repeal a reform that has hurt labor rights. It was established as a way to supposedly promote competitiveness and productivity in the private sector.
We want to say to Mr. Vizcarra that workers and Peruvians as a whole have not given him a blank check to implement labor reforms and cut back the right of the workers. If Mr. Vizcarra does not repeal the decree, workers' unions will call for a national strike all across the country, and he will be the responsible if there is a social upheaval.
Workers will not accept attacks against their rights on labor stability, on collective negotiation, against benefits they have historically earned.
We will not allow them to take away what little we have.
He must think about the working class because we earn so little, and yet they take all the money. It shouldn't be like that.
This reform is also being questioned by several experts.
What he's doing is reducing revenues and the purchasing power of workers. Purchasing power is going to start going in the opposite direction of our economy's growth. We have to think of more competitiveness and productivity, but not at the expense of workers.
Experts assure that Peru has a 40-year history of cutting back rights. Informal work alone has grown from 25% to 75%.
If I want to end informal work, attacking something that does not generate this type of work, like the rights of the workers, will not work. It will only produce more poverty, more insecurity, but informal work will continue growing.
According to experts, one of the goals of these neoliberal policies is to destroy trade unions, which in 1990 counted for 23% of the economically active population, and today they only reach 4%.
4 people have been arrested after clashes with the police in Chile. Riot police fired tear gas and water cannons at dozens of Chilean fishermen, protesting against a law on cuttlefish capture in the southern town of Talcahuano. Demonstrators set barricades on fire and blocked access to the harbor. Industrial fishermen say the new law threatens their rights because it only allows artisan fishermen to capture the mollusk. The Campesino Workers Union Tupac Katari in Bolivia has thrown their support behind President Evo Morales in this year's upcoming elections. Primary elections in the Andean nation are set for the end of January, followed by general elections in October. Meanwhile, the implementation of universal health care has been supported by citizens. It will benefit more than 5 million Bolivians who don't have medical insurance. Argentina will need at least 4 years to lower poverty, according to a report from the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. CEPAL's report also said a radical change is needed from the current policies of Macri's government. The Commission estimated that the number of underprivileged people in the region has risen to 184 million, that's roughly 30% of Latin America's population. Hundreds of Hondurans, part of the latest migrant caravan, who were stopped by officials at the Guatemalan border. Riot police prevented migrants from entering the country and demanded they provide personal documents to continue their journey. The new migrant caravan started their trip to the United States on Tuesday. About 200 migrants were able to pass through the Agua Caliente border crossing on Tuesday. However, hundreds were turned away or detained by Guatemalan migration officials for not having the necessary documents to enter the country.
The stories of Hondurans fleeing their country are all very similar. They say they do not have any options here, so they leave to protect their lives.
On April 9th of 2016, I was shot. The bullet went right through me. I sought justice, but authorities never solved my case.
Young people make up the majority of this second caravan. Their hopelessness and fear for the future has forced them to look for new opportunities.
There have been so many deaths. It's difficult not to be affected by them, so I want to be far away.
Many migrants have been victims of violence, and now they have to leave their families.
My mother is sick, and now she's going to be alone. She got shot the same day when I was attacked.
Daily violence has created panic and fear among the population, especially in those who live in the most dangerous areas.
There was a massacre where I was working. They told me they were going to kill me too. That is why I'm fleeing. There's a lot of violence and crime, and we're starving too.
A large percentage of people in the first and second migrant caravans are young people, so the future of Hondurans is fleeing from the country in order to save their own lives.
We move on to Mexico, where the new government has delivered one of its first promises to carry out an investigation into the case of the 43 missing students from Ayotzinapa. Our correspondent Pablo Perez has the details.
The parents of the 43 students who were forcibly disappeared in 2014 in the town of Iguala are now part of a government commission they long demanded. Now, they are no longer witnesses, but an integral part of the Presidential Truth and Justice Commission for the Ayotzinapa case.
We must help to find the truth in order to satisfy the demands of the families of the 43 missing students.
The Truth Commission is made up not only of public officials, but also includes some of the students' parents, as well as human rights activists and outside experts. They want to uncover the truth they believe was hidden by the government of former President Enrique Peña Nieto.
As parents, this commission means everything to us. As the investigations continue, we will be able to build more trust.
In this way, what President López Obrador established in a decree 2 days after taking office is being put into practice, and it's just the first of many decrees signed by the president.
This is the result of our efforts, of the insistence of the families, of our resistance. The truth will come out, and something like this will never be allowed to happen again.
Omar survived the violence of that fateful night in Iguala, when 43 of his friends disappeared and another 3 were murdered. For him, this new initiative would not only benefit these families.
It's not just the 43 missing students. We need the government to assume responsibility for bringing to light the truth about every case of disappearance.
At the same time, the Supreme Court has ordered an investigation into public officials working for the previous administration due to irregularities in the investigation of the Ayotzinapa case. As part of its commitment to the principle of transparency, the newly formed Truth Commission has promised that all information discovered will be made available on a government website.
Colombian authorities have partially closed down the Itinguango Dam hydroelectric project. This happened after a 40-meter wide hole was found underground. Last week, the government activated an alert plan to monitor possible risks around the dam. Around 1,000 rescue personnel have been working to make sure all communities surrounding the dam have been properly evacuated. Hundreds of young Cubans have made an economic effort to meet Pope Francis in Panama. Close to 500 Cubans traveled to Panama to participate in the World Youth Day, a week-long event which starts on January 22. Many of them save and borrow great amount of money to be able to fund the $700 trip.
I have always said that I don't want to leave Cuba, but I'm excited to go as Cuban, carrying my flag. In fact, I already have my flag because it's part of my identity, of who I am. I choose to live in Cuba.
There were young people, I include myself among them, that had to pay for the trip, which is very difficult because the salary here is not enough. So I had to borrow money and so on, and I managed to get enough to go to the conference.
Cuba and Belize have committed to strengthening bilateral relations. President Miguel Díaz-Canel met with Belize Prime Minister Dean Barrow, who is in an official visit to Cuba. For over 2 decades, Belize and Cuba have enjoyed mutual cooperation in health and education. Time for a second break. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back. Palestine will try to become a full United Nations member now that it has assumed the presidency of the Group of 77 and China. Our correspondent in Egypt, Nayara Tardo, has the latest.
Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki says Palestine will ask for full membership in the United Nations, even though the move would likely be blocked by the US and Israel. The statement comes as Palestine assumes the presidency of the Group of 77 and China. Al-Maliki, who was in the delegation with President Mahmoud Abbas at the UN, called it a great advancement for the Palestinian cause. It means Palestine can now introduce declarations and motions of procedures before the organization. Secretary General of the Committee for Palestine Liberation, Syed Erekab, said Palestine will work to support all state members and to promote a fair and effective world order. During the official ceremony where the presidency was handed over, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, congratulated Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian people on this important step. He also recognized the work of Egypt during its presidency of the Group of 77 and China in 2018.
Kenya's opposition leader has met with the relatives of persons killed in Tuesday's terror attack at a hotel. Raila Odinga, visited the funeral home where more than 100 mourners gathered. The opposition leader condemned the security forces for taking swift action. He also sent a message to Al-Shabaab, who have since claimed responsibility for the attack that killed 14.
If the intention of the terrorists is to try to intimidate and cow the people of Kenya, they are dialing a wrong number. The people of Kenya will not be cowed by this kind of dastardly act of violence. This actually helps to fortify our unity as a people.
The unrest due to fuel price protests has left travelers from Zimbabwe stranded. Bus passengers traveling to Zimbabwe from South Africa found themselves stranded in Johannesburg as cross-border buses canceled their routes. This has also blocked the flow of goods into Zimbabwe from the neighboring countries.
We were supposed to go to Harare, Zimbabwe now. We are coming from Port Elizabeth, but we can't proceed because they are saying things are tough. The buses are being banned and the roads are blocked. It's total shutdown. So as for today, we have to sleep here in Joburg.
An Iranian news anchor from the station Press TV is being held in a detention center in Washington, D.C. No formal charges have been leveled against Hashemi, who is a U.S. citizen. Reports have indicated that Hashemi had her hijab removed against her will and that she was denied access to food. Relatives were unable to contact Hashemi for over 48 hours. She was arrested at St. Louis Airport. At Press TV's CEO gave a news conference about the case earlier on Wednesday.
We hereby call on the U.S. government officials to talk about her accusation, about her detention place and the reason for her detention anytime soon, because it seems that being transparent toward the world opinion is the best help that we can have for her release. We do not spare any efforts to do any legal action for her release. And this commitment, this is our ethical commitment, legal commitment, and administrative commitment regarding Ms. Hashemi. But with regard to our knowledge about the U.S. government, especially under the anti-terrorism law that is there in that country, without any pretext, without any indictment, they can actually arrest people and then detain people for years and then could release them without any accusations, or they may continue the arrest.
A new exhibit at the Paris Aquarium in France is hoping to raise awareness about climate change. It includes 45 species of jellyfish floating in 24 pools. It aims to show how climate change threatens marine life and specifically how warmer seas affect jellyfish populations.
Et pour toutes ces raisons, les méduses sont des marqueurs des dérèglements climatiques.
We come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.